I asked ChatGPT to give me a nightmare scenario for 2025. We'll see what it thinks and what I think they can do to overcome it right here on Locked On Clemson.
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Tiger fans? I'm Morgan Thomas, Clemson fan, Clemson grad, host and producer of Locked On Clemson, and part-time host and producer over on 105.5 FM The Roar. Thank you so much for making Locked On Clemson your first listen every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if you're new to the show, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you never miss an episode. You know how we do it here on Locked On, exclusive Clemson content Monday through Friday, every single week. And don't forget to follow me in between episodes over on X at the Morgan T Show, where we can talk about all things Clemson whenever, however you want. Today, I wanted to get into a what if scenario. I was looking at some topics, and since it's the off season, there's no basketball, there's no football. Baseball is kind of frustrating. I don't even want to talk about them. Softball, on the other hand, just won the ACC championship for the first time in program history. So shout out to them. As you know, there's not another YouTube channel that does softball content about Clemson other than me. So, I love the softball team, and I'm so proud of them for getting over that milestone there and beating Florida State first time ever and taking them down. So getting that 2025 ACC championship. So shout out to them. But I was looking at maybe some different topics that were out there to kind of, get me through the offseason, to get you through the offseason, and kind of, I was a little bit nervous about this one because I felt like I said, well, maybe I can ask, the AI, what ChatGPT, if you will, what were some of the nightmare scenarios that could happen in Clemson 2025? And I know what you're thinking, Morgan. Why would you even start doing this? Let's not talk about nightmare scenarios. Let's not get into that at all. But I really feel like, it is just for fun, one. So I'm not trying to jinx the team in any way possible. But I also wanted to think like, is Clemson really set up for some of the worst case scenario? And I'm kind of, as I'm thinking it through, I do feel like some of these are still manageable for the Tigers because of the opportunity that they have, because of the roster that they have, and really the staff that they have. So while there's some that are more shocking than others, I wanted to start with this one and kind of go through it. So nightmare what if episode, and maybe I'll do it all week. We'll see if you like it. You just let me know. But hey, this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, you see there on today's show, the nightmare what ifs and the two positions that ChatGPT gave me, and I said, hey, I had some ideas, but I wanted to throw out, what was maybe a disaster scenario when it came to the roster? Can Clemson survive if you lose certain starters? Can they survive? Can they thrive? Can they still win the ACC? Will they have depth issues? Will they have chemistry issues? Will the team just completely collapse? And originally it gave me Cade Klubnik, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that at all. We're not going to go down Cade Klubnik at all. I did not like that idea because Cade is, to me, too easy of an opportunity to pick from, right? Because Cade is the quarterback. If you lose your quarterback, that's going to really disrupt any team, not just Clemson. But I said, no, let's go back. Let's not do quarterbacks. Let's not do like that one position. Give me another position that, we have some depth there, but maybe not as good as the starter that's there, and kind of go from there. And maybe a position that people don't really think about because, maybe there is a lot of depth and it's not a big deal. But the first position and the first player that it came up with was Peter Woods, really the second one. The first one was Cade Klubnik. So what if Peter Woods wasn't on the team? Let's just do that. I'm not going to say anything about injuries or getting hurt or anything that I feel like would just jinx him altogether. But the question is, how big of a hit would it be if Peter Woods was not on the team and he was not able to participate for whatever reason? So let's say he just moved on, went to the NFL last season, if that was even an opportunity. It wasn't, but let's just say that could have been the case here. Let's think of it positively, because we are going to have to think about this, right? I mean, not necessarily this season, but in the future. Peter Woods is not going to be around. Cade Klubnik's not going to be around. So it's kind of, to me, like a forecasting for 2026, really, maybe even 2027 with Peter Woods. Some of these guys may stay around, but I do feel like Peter Woods is going to be a guy who is going to possibly be fighting for the number one or the first round draft pick, one of the first round draft pick, not the number one draft pick. Let me take that back. But he'll be fighting for one of those spots in the first round draft of the NFL. So what if Peter Woods was not on the team for this season? How big of a hit would that give to Clemson's defensive front? How would that hurt them schematically, leadership-wise, emotionally? To me, TJ Parker is part of the heart of the defense, and there are other guys I think could pick up the slack with being leaders and heart of the defense. But Peter Woods is up there. He is truly a guy who you look to be the glue, the guy that just, you don't have to worry about, right? He's going to do his job. He's going to do his assignment. He's going to beat his man. The run defense has to be almost exclusively centered around him as the key focal point to design the start of the heaviest amount of pressure. You're always going to get pressure from Peter Woods. And if you don't get full on penetration from Peter Woods, you're going to get double teams. You're going to get offensive lines that are schemed towards him and around him, and maybe even away from him. So you're losing a lot of opportunity there to kind of build around Peter Woods. Who would you build around after that? To me, it seems very difficult to think about, because there is a very unknown beyond Peter Woods, and there hasn't been anybody that I feel like has shown up to kind of take the double teams, take the point of attack, force the chaos at the line of scrimmage. Now there are guys who are behind him on the depth chart. You've got Peter Woods, obviously the alpha, the all-American guy, the scheme changer, everything revolves around him. The elite freak athlete, right? The tone setter for Tom Allen. But who is behind him? Because you're going to have DeMonte Capehart to his side. He's the veteran that has the size and the experience. But are you telling me Vic Burley is going to be that guy? I mean, he's highly recruited. We talked about him a ton. He seems to have the physical measurables to be there. But if Peter Woods is out, is Vic Burley going to be that guy? Steph Green, we've seen a lot of flashes of upside on him, and he had from what I understand, a pretty good spring so far. But we've seen him on the field more than most, but not super consistent there. And there were times where he was out there in 2024, and that's when the biggest runs happened. A lot of people say, well, I like Steph Green. I like him too. But when you go back and look at some of those big chunk plays, it was when Capehart and Woods weren't out there, and you had other guys out there like Dinoff and Steph Green, and they were getting hurt from the rushing attack. Is it Heaven Brown Schuler, this redshirt freshman that is a physically built guy, but we really haven't seen much of him? Caden Story, haven't seen much of him. Could it be the true freshman Amari Adams? Maybe. I think you feel pretty good about a guy who's one of the best recruits in the country in Amari Adams, and they've already been bragging about him a ton. But who is it going to be? It might have to rotate until they figure it out. I don't know if they actually know, because I don't know. Now I'm just talking head, so me not knowing is not that big a deal. But they probably know more than I do. I mean, they should, right? But I would say Stephylon Green, Vic Burley, as long as they're healthy, and then Amari Adams. To me, you'd probably throw Amari Adams in there pretty quickly because of all the hype that you had around him. So it is something that I think is fun to talk about. Hopefully, it never happens. But we saw it in 2024 where Peter Woods got injured by a ridiculous low block to the knees all away from the ball. And so, at any given moment, somebody can be taken out of the game. And how is the defense going to respond? Is it a detrimental collapse to the defense if he's out? I don't think so. But we know we've already seen what happens when he's out. We've already seen it. We've seen the run defense and stopping the run get much, much worse. So I don't want to see a ton of Peter Woods out. I know he's going to have to rotate. I would rather rotate for breath and breathers than I would have to replace Peter Woods. But it is something that Clemson's going to have to do. And they have Amari Adams as that guy next up. But there are some other guys that deserve a chance, that have earned a chance in the rotation to see what they can do. Will Tom Allen change his scheme much at all in this scenario? I don't think so. I think you just have to go with whoever's next man up. Keep your scheme. Now the plays that you actually call might change because of the impact that he has on those double teams and things like that. So, all right, I hope you enjoyed the first segment. I think it's fun. As I'm getting into it, I try not to write out all of my thoughts. I have bullet points that I want to hit on. But as I'm thinking it through, I try to give you an in the moment emotions on it. And if it were to happen, I'd be very upset as a Clemson fan. But I do think Clemson could get through. They won't have as good of numbers against the run if he's not out there. That's for sure. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about the next position. And I asked Chat to give me offense and defense. So we're going to talk about the tight end room if a player is out, coming up next. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It is easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. And you know how it is. You get into shopping and eating out. And what happened to me is my bank account kept going down and down. And I thought, where's my money going? And I looked and I noticed that it was with eating out. And so now with Monarch Money, I'm able to budget smarter, save more, and partner with my wife to make sure that we set goals together. It takes all the stress out of it. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, so segment 2 here, we're going to jump over to the tight end room and talk really about Josh Sapp and the tight end room, because ChatGPT gave me Josh Sapp. Now, I wouldn't necessarily think that maybe he is number one. To me, tight end number one was Olsen Pat Henry, but I could see where Josh Sapp could be tight end number one for many people as well, because when you think about who was the tight end that made the bigger plays, that got more open than other tight ends. I mean, even more than Jake Brenningstool. And we like to talk about how much potential Jake Brenningstool had, but he was pretty much disappointing as a player at Clemson. He didn't have, a superstar season at all. Not anything to buy a jersey over, and not anything to sign an autograph over, really. I mean, he was a player on the team. He was a contributor on the team. He made some good plays and he made some bad plays. But he wasn't like a superstar that you're going to say, wow, from that group of guys, I remember him, And that's unfortunate because he came in with a lot of hype. And Josh Sapp came in with the opposite, because everybody thought, oh, well, this guy is a coach's or a former player's kid. He's a legacy, Patrick Sapp, blah, 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 all this stuff. He's not he doesn't deserve to be there. He's just given the opportunity, which is all crap. I mean, Josh Sapp is obviously a really good player, and he's really shown what he can do at the tight end position. And I actually like him a ton. Garrett Riley does, have some scheme around Josh Sapp. And I do feel like that with today's offense, with this roster, you have so many weapons at wide receiver, and now you have some versatile weapons at the running back position that aren't Phil Maffa, that can catch the ball out of the backfield. You even have a former wide receiver at running back. So to me, that does diminish the need for a tight end. Now, I know Garrett Riley likes to use tight ends. I mean, he's when he was at TCU, their tight end was drafted and was a good one. And a lot of their plays went through him and the outside wide receiver. But what about at Clemson? We really haven't seen that a ton at all. Now, some of the games you did feel like Riley dialed up plays for Jake Brenningstool, and it was a mixed bag. Sometimes they were caught for extra yards. Sometimes they were dropped. You just didn't know what you were going to get. There wasn't very much consistency there. And Josh Sapp, to me, was a bright light, a bright spot for the team on the offense. Does the offense become more predictable if he is not playing this season for whatever reason? Let's say he went to the NFL. Okay, so we're going to go with the positive again. I don't think that the offense becomes more predictable. I don't think that the tight end is any sort of, at least from what we've seen so far, not really anything revolved around it. Not a safety valve. It should be a safety valve, though, right? I mean, and also without Josh Sapp, I think you're going to have Olsen Pat Henry step in. He is solid. I think he can be explosive. Christian Bentancur, we've heard a lot of good things, but he is very new and young. And then you have the ultimate wild card, and kind of indicative of what the offense is like, what the tight end room is. Dabo has brought in Ian Shefflin, a former basketball player, 6'8" rebound machine, to be a red zone mismatch. If he can get the blocking down and the route running down, he's extremely green and in development. But we're talking about a guy who could be a potential game changer in the red zone. So there are definitely other opportunities out there. OPH is probably the most proven one to me. Josh Sapp and OPH both equally as number ones for me. So that's why I'm not super worried about losing or not having one of those players for whatever reason, because the guys behind them have talent. We just haven't seen it yet. There's obviously the freak athlete, Ian Shefflin. I don't know how I feel about it. I think that, to me, I'm gonna live on the side of not that big a deal. I don't think that it will kill Garrett Riley's scheme at all. Forcing more 4 wide receivers sets instead of, 2 tight ends. I assumed we weren't going to use Clemson wasn't going to use 2 tight ends anyways. So they were going to probably have 1 tight end at most in any situation. And with the way that spread offenses are, you can run the ball, and the way the run backs they have, they're fast enough to the outside where you can run the ball with 5 offensive linemen and no extra blocker there. More or less doing misdirection and sweep plays and stuff like that can help with where you don't even need a tight end in the scenario. So to me, on a scale of 1 to 10, big deal. We'll go back to Peter Woods, big deal. I would say, an 8. If you want to say Josh Sapp, big deal, I'd probably say like a 4. I'm not as worried if you told me that the tight end room was with those other guys, but that doesn't, and it's not really a knock on Josh Sapp at all. It's just that he's very even with the rest of the guys. Nobody has stepped up to say this is the superstar and everybody else is like 2 or 3 strings behind him. Nobody has really kind of shown that. Now, Josh Sapp is definitely a huge contributor to the team, and I think he makes some big plays here and there. But I think it really goes back to just everybody else. You're at a point where I would say the same thing for wide receiver. you have so many wide receivers that you can rely on right now that, if you lose one, not as bad, but you have so many that it kind of diminishes the role of the tight end just by the fact that you have more weapons at wide receiver. So if you're me as a fan, if you're asking me what would I rather see, I would rather see more wide receivers this season than more tight ends. It hasn't always been the case, but that's what I'm going with. And your level of progression would probably be OPH, Bentancur, and then maybe later on in the season, Ian Shefflin. I mean, maybe not later on in the season. I mean, I guess my expectations need to be pretty low for Ian Shefflin. You'd probably see him against the easier teams, and get some fun crowd igniting touchdowns from him. But I just don't see Ian Shefflin participating at all against LSU or against Florida State, even Louisville, South Carolina. That would be quite shocking if he is out there in any aspect for those games. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my thoughts. All right, we're going to finish up the episode talking about just the team as a whole and how any kind of change like this would impact them. And would Clemson still be able to make the ACC championship and even the playoffs without these players? All right, so the ripple effect after this, I think that when you look at kind of college football as a whole, you do have to be able to dominate at the line of scrimmage. That's really, really important for being able to get far into the postseason. What we've kind of seen is that, at least in the past maybe 2 or 3 years, I see a lean more towards teams that can control the line of scrimmage, teams that have confidence running the ball against the best competition. If you turn into a scenario where you just basically cannot run the ball and you cannot stop the run, like what Clemson had a problem with in 2024, while you may be able to, because of explosive plays and just sheer talent, you may be able to get to the postseason, it's going to be very hard for you to get very far or even win critical games. And that's what I talked about with Cade Klubnik. Cade still needs a critical game. He needs a marquee game. He needs multiple marquee games to solidify his legacy as a Clemson Tiger. He's won a lot of games, but the biggest games and the biggest stages he has not won. Outside of an ACC championship, 2 ACC championships, I'll give him the North Carolina one. Those are against teams that nationally nobody cares about. The Tar Heels, they only care about because Bill Belichick and his weird girlfriend. The SMU Mustangs, they really only cared about just because to play upset to Clemson and the major powerhouses of college football. So they weren't teams that you could look back and say, and even back when Cade beat the Tar Heels, it was Mac Brown, and he only had 5 players from the secondary leave the program before that game. So, it was a weird game for sure. But at the end of the day, whether you believe me or not, the truth is that Cade needs a marquee wins, and this season is that season to do so. Now, how much does that affect Cade's ability and Clemson's ability to get marquee wins? Going to the tight end, I don't think that while they are productive, I don't think that Josh Sapp is a tone setter for the offense. So without him, I don't worry so much about the emotion of the team or the leadership of the team or the production of the team. I think that there'll be a next man up mentality. Will there be somewhat of a fall off? It's hard to say, because I do feel like Olson, Pat Henry is pretty similar. So when it comes to a Cade Klubnik standpoint, a Garrett Riley standpoint, I'm not really as worried about it. And when it comes to winning the marquee games, I wouldn't put Josh Sapp as a player who is going to win a marquee game. He's going to be needed to win a marquee game. Now, he is needed to have a successful season. And it's really no knock on him. It's just the roster that we have. Clemson has a roster, I think, that is, one of the most stacked rosters that they've had in quite some time, and most talented rosters, and a lot of returning players. So I don't want you to walk away from this podcast thinking, wow, Morgan doesn't like this player or that player. It's really not about that. It's really just about the roster. And on the offensive side of the ball, whether it was Olsen Pat Henry, Josh Sapp, Christian Bentancur, or Ian Shefflin, any one of those names, you pick one out of a hat and you tell me, hey, how do you feel about the offense? This guy's not there. The tight end really is just a diminished position for me. Maybe I'm completely lost. Maybe I'm losing it. You should tell me over on X at the Morgan T Show or over on YouTube in the comments. Tell me if I'm crazy. But I don't think that I'm losing it. I do think that Clemson has other opportunities. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, I am worried if you don't have Peter Woods for an extended period of time or for all season. If that scenario ever were to play it out, or even moving on to next season and he goes to the NFL, that is a scenario that bothers me for sure, because the defense to me is set up around Peter Woods and his production, and the guys behind him, I do have some question marks. Can they still make it to the playoffs or to the ACC championship game without these two players? I would say yes, because I do think that Clemson can adjust for Peter Woods. It might hurt much more. Their production on run stopping may hurt much more, but I do think that Peter Woods will. There's other guys that can step up. There's different ways that they can use the defense, and they may have to set into a 4-3 more exclusively against the run as well. But I do feel like that the roster is set up to be able to still be productive if they didn't have these guys. And it goes back to, again, I want to say this 1,000 times. It's not a knock against these two guys. It's really about the roster and what is around the rest of the team. I think this team is very loaded in other positions, and they can make moves as they need to. And young stars will rise up. And that's what we love about college football, is because you can't stay around forever. You have to move on eventually. You have to graduate. Well, right now anyways, according to lawyers and the judges of the country, maybe you can be a college football player for 30 years. Who knows? But right now, that's what we love about college football, is that you do have to move on eventually. It's not a professional world where you can sign a big-time contract and stay here forever. Maybe in the locker room, since these guys are sold 100,000% on Clemson, maybe there's some loss in leadership from these two guys. I don't know locker room as much as obviously the coaches do, but I would think that there's probably some loss of leadership there. So other guys would have to step up and play a leadership role on the defense and the offense if these guys weren't around. And that's what's going to happen next season or in the next couple of seasons when these guys graduate or go to the NFL for sure. All right. Well, hey, I hope that you enjoyed this kind of interesting podcast. I'm going to try to maybe do some more this week as I'll be traveling. So you possibly won't see the same background. So bear with me as I'm traveling. I'm going to try to take my mic and my camera with me. But we'll still keep giving you the same Clemson content Monday through Friday, every single week over here on Locked On Clemson. So thank you so much for making Locked On Clemson your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft with Damon Parson and Keith Sanchez as your favorite collegiate players get ready to move on to the professional world. You'll get rumors and rankings and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And as always, Tiger fans, we'll see you tomorrow, and we'll see you at the top of the hill.